Okay, let's unpack this. I
Yeah.
want you to just pause for a second, literally, if you can,
Yeah.
and think about the word wrong.
Mm-hmm.
When you say something is wrong, what are you actually feeling? Is it, a moral judgment like that person is evil?
Or is it just discomfort, like a scratchy sweater?
Yeah, exactly.
Mm.
Or maybe it's just weird.
Hey, it's such a heavy word. We throw it around all the time, but we rarely inspect what's going on under the hood. It carries a ton of weight.
It really does. And that is why the source material we are diving into today didn't just catch my attention, it kind of grabbed me by the throat.
Ah.
It opens with a statement that feels almost illegal to say out loud. 7 syllables. Nothing coherent is wrong.
It's a very provocative thesis. It immediately triggers that wait a minute reflex in your brain.
It does.
It challenges how we categorize
Well,
almost everything.
it sounds like a riddle, right?
Oh, yeah.
Or it's something you see on a coffee mug.
Yeah.
Nothing coherent is wrong. But as we dug into this material, which is basically a philosophical exploration of systems, alignment, and the nature of reality, I realized this isn't just some catchy phrase.
No, it's a framework.
It's a completely different way of seeing the world.
Yeah.
But I have to play the skeptic here, like right away. If I say nothing coherent is wrong,
Yeah.
am I just letting bad behavior off the hook?
That is the immediate fear, isn't it? That this is all just fancy wordplay for moral relativism.
Yeah.
But the mission of this deep dive is to really separate two things that we often mix up: moral judgment and structural integrity. This text isn't saying do whatever you want.
So it's not a free pass.
Not at all. It's talking about physics, in a way. The physics of relationships in reality.
Physics is a good way to frame it.
We're looking for the difference between forced alignment, trying to jam a square peg in a round hole because you think it should fit, and true connection.
Okay, so if we're going to understand why nothing coherent is wrong, we probably need to agree on what coherent actually means.
Right.
Because in my head, coherence is usually just like, I can understand what you're saying,
Yeah.
He made a coherent argument. But the source material defines it much more broadly.
It does. It moves way beyond linguistics into, systems theory.
Mm-hmm.
The text defines coherence as internal consistency.
Okay.
It says that when something is coherent, its parts are in relationship rather than opposition.
In relationship rather than opposition. That's a key phrase. Can
Yeah.
we ground that? What does that actually look like?
Well, think of a healthy ecosystem. You have predators, you have prey, you have weather. It might seem chaotic or even violent to an observer,
Mm-hmm.
but the parts are in relationship. The wolf eating the deer isn't wrong in that structural sense. It's part of the energy transfer of the whole system.
The signals are integrated.
Exactly. Actions match the context.
Okay, so coherence is about the whole system working together without fighting itself.
Precisely. And then on the flip side, you have the text's definition of wrongness. And this is where it gets really interesting for me. It doesn't define wrongness as, breaking a rule or being impolite. It defines wrongness as a symptom of disconnection.
That shifts the perspective entirely. It describes wrongness as something forced, brittle, or misaligned.
Think about a bridge. A bridge isn't wrong because it's ugly. It's wrong if the tension cables are fighting gravity in a way that exceeds their capacity.
Ah, I see.
If you have to use duct tape and, prayers to keep it standing, that structure is wrong. It's not about a list of rules, but about whether the system can actually hold itself together without artificial pressure.
So we have coherence, which is flow and relationship, and wrongness, which is disconnection and force.
That's it.
Let's dive into the first big trap the text points out, because I think this is where most of us, myself included, get tripped up. We confuse feeling good with being right.
The trap of comfort. This is a huge one.
The illusion of comfort. The text is very explicit about this. It says, coherence does not mean comfort. It does not mean ease.
And this next one is the killer.
It does not mean social approval.
That is a difficult pill to swallow for us. We're social creatures. We're so hardwired to think that if everyone agrees with us, or if something feels easy and smooth, it must be right.
But the source argues that coherence, that true structural integrity, can actually be the opposite.
Exactly.
It says something coherent can be challenging, unfamiliar, or disruptive.
Disruptive is the key word there. We usually label disruptive things as wrong immediately.
Right.
If someone comes into a meeting and points out a massive flaw in the project, everyone gets uncomfortable, the room goes quiet,
You feel that tension.
and we think, oh, this is wrong, this person is being difficult.
Right, because they broke the social flow.
Exactly, but the text argues that that disruption can be perfectly coherent. That person might be the only one in the room speaking the truth.
So their statement is right in its structure because it aligns with the reality of the project, even if it makes everyone squirm.
Yes, because it fits within a larger pattern. That's a line that really stood out. Something can look chaotic up close, but if you zoom out, it fits.
And this is where the text makes a crucial distinction between unfamiliarity and wrongness.
It does. It says judgment often confuses unfamiliarity with wrongness.
Just because you haven't seen it before, or it feels alien to your experience, doesn't mean it lacks coherence.
Unfamiliar does not mean incoherent.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a mantra we should probably all tape to our mirrors.
But this is tricky, isn't it? Because sometimes things feel weird because they are wrong. How do we tell the difference?
Well, the text actually gives us some sensory language for this. It asks you to feel the texture of the situation.
Not just think about it, but feel it.
Right. It moves away from intellectual analysis and into somatic awareness. The text says that what is wrong in this structural sense tends to feel forced or brittle.
Brittle, that's such a vivid word.
Mm.
It makes me think of dry twigs or old plastic that just snaps.
It implies it's ready to snap. It says wrongness requires suppression to maintain.
That is the tell. If you have to shove something down, hide parts of it, or use a lot of energy just to keep the facade up, that's wrongness. Like a relationship where you have to constantly walk on eggshells and pretend you don't have certain needs just to keep the peace, that piece is brittle.
Correct. The text says it collapses under honest attention. If you just look at it clearly, without flinching, the whole thing falls apart. That's a sign of disconnection.
Whereas coherence,
How does that feel?
the text describes it as stable. It says coherence aligns cause and effect and reduces internal conflict.
So even if it's difficult or challenging.
Even then, there's a sense of solidity to it. It doesn't need you to prop it up.
So wrongness is a house of cards that you're terrified to breathe on.
Yeah.
And coherence is a boulder. You might stub your toe on the boulder, it might be in your way, but it is solid, it's real.
That brings us to the second deep dive segment, which is all about how these two states handle stress. Because that is the true test of any system, isn't it? What happens when you apply pressure?
The text says coherence can hold tension without breaking. This is such a critical nuance. We often think that if there is tension, something must be wrong. We think, oh, there's conflict here, I need to fix it.
But the text says no.
No. Coherence allows contradiction to resolve through integration rather than denial.
Integration rather than denial. Want to pause on that. Does that just mean it's a compromise? Like we just meet in the middle?
No, and I think that's a common misconception. Compromise often means everyone loses a little something.
Right.
Integration means the structure is big enough to hold the truth of both sides. It preserves the whole by including its parts.
Okay, that sounds ideal, but let's contrast that with wrongness again, because
Yeah.
the text has a really powerful warning here.
It does. It says, wrongness appears when parts must be sacrificed to preserve the whole.
Oof. That is a powerful diagnostic tool right there.
It really is.
If you're in a situation, a job, a family dynamic, a belief system, and you feel like you have to chop off a part of yourself just to stay in it, that is the definition of wrongness according to this text.
Yes. If the survival of the system requires the destruction or suppression of its components, it is brittle. It's disconnected. It is wrong.
Like a tyrannical government.
Perfect example. It requires the suppression of dissent to survive. It has to sacrifice its citizens' freedom to maintain order. That is structurally wrong. It is incoherent because the parts are in opposition to the whole.
And this leads right to the idea of force. The text says, nothing coherent needs to justify itself through force.
It proves itself through continuity.
I love that. It doesn't need to argue. It doesn't need to fight. It just
Yeah.
continues. It lasts.
Because it adapts. The text mentions that coherent things adapt instead of fracture.
Right.
When a system is brittle, when it's wrong, it can't change. If the wind blows too hard, it snaps.
Right.
But a coherent system responds.
And that's another distinction mentioned, reaction versus response.
Yes, coherence responds. Wrongness reacts.
A reaction is defensive.
It's immediate, often unthinking. It's that knee-jerk defense mechanism. A response implies taking in the signal, integrating it, and then adjusting. It says coherent things stabilize over time. They actually get stronger.
So if you're looking at something in your life and wondering, is this right for me?
Yeah.
Don't look at whether it's easy.
No.
Look at whether it's stabilizing over time, or if you're constantly having to use force to keep it from exploding.
Exactly. Are you exhausting yourself maintaining the illusion? Or is the thing sustaining itself?
Okay, I'm with you so far.
Okay.
But now we have to get to the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
This is the part of the text I really struggled with, and I think our listeners might too.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you say nothing coherent is wrong, and that coherence doesn't equal social approval, people might start thinking,
So a coherent villain is fine.
right, is a coherent act of violence okay?
It's the most provocative part of the text, and it's the most important one to understand correctly. Because if we get this wrong, we fall into a really dangerous nihilism.
Exactly. I mean, imagine
Yeah.
a highly organized crime syndicate. They have a hierarchy. They have rules. They are internally consistent.
Sure.
They don't have parts fighting each other. Snitches get dealt with. So is the mafia coherent? And therefore, is it not wrong?
That is the ultimate test case.
Yeah.
And the text anticipates this. It states very, very clearly, this principle does not excuse harm.
Thank goodness. But how does it square that circle? Because to me, the mafia looks pretty structurally sound. It lasts for decades.
But does it last without force?
No, it runs on force.
Exactly. It runs on suppression. It runs on fear. The coherence of a crime syndicate is an illusion maintained by extreme brutality. It is brittle.
Yeah.
The moment the fear stops, the system collapses.
So it fails the force test.
It fails the force test, and it fails the relationship test. The source defines harm as incoherence in action.
Harm is incoherence in action. Unpack that for me.
It argues that when harm appears, coherence has already been lost. Harm is what happens when things are disconnected. Violence is the ultimate disconnection.
It's domination.
It's the attempt to dominate reality rather than align with it.
So you can't have a coherent murder or coherent abuse.
According to this philosophical framework, no. Because remember the definition of coherence. Parts are in relationship rather than opposition.
And harm is, by definition, opposition.
It's the breaking of relationship.
So when we see harm, we aren't seeing a bad coherence. We are seeing the result of a system that has fractured. We're seeing the shrapnel.
We are seeing the debris of disconnection. The text says clearly, nothing coherent is wrong because coherence is alignment with reality as it is.
Not as it is feared or resisted.
That's the part. Alignment with reality as it is. It's such a grounding statement. It implies that harm comes from resisting reality, from fear.
When we fear reality, we try to control it.
We use force. We suppress. We create those brittle structures. We build that house of cards. And eventually those structures snap. And that snapping is what we experience as harm.
So the argument is that reality itself, the fundamental nature of things, is coherent. And our problems arise when we try to fight that reality.
Yes. Coherence is durable because it aligns with the truth of the situation. Wrongness and the harm that flows from it is what happens when we try to impose a false structure on top of reality.
It changes how you look at bad behavior. Instead of just seeing it as evil, you see it as broken.
Yeah.
You see it as a desperate, brittle attempt to force something that isn't there. It doesn't excuse it,
No, the text is clear on that.
but it diagnoses it differently.
And that diagnosis is crucial because if you diagnose it as evil, your only response is to attack it. But if you diagnose it as incoherence, your response changes.
And that leads us to the final instruction of the text.
Yeah.
Because if we accept all of this, if wrongness is disconnection and coherence is reality, what do we actually do with that?
This is the practical application. The text gives us a very specific instruction for when we encounter coherence, especially that challenging, disruptive, uncomfortable coherence we talked about.
It says, when you encounter coherence, the task is not to correct it, but to understand it.
That runs counter to almost every instinct we have.
Not to correct it? That is so hard. My instinct when I see something disruptive or weird is to fix it, to smooth it over,
Yeah.
to say, hey, let's all calm down.
But if you try to fix coherence, you are the one introducing the force. You're the one trying to suppress reality. You become the agent of wrongness.
So the text says the goal is to understand it. Why?
Because, as the text concludes, that is how wrongness dissolves.
That is how wrongness dissolves.
Think about a child acting out, screaming in a supermarket. It feels wrong. It feels chaotic.
Mm-hmm.
Your instinct is to use force, to scold, to suppress, to correct the behavior.
Right, just to make it stop.
But the child's behavior is actually coherent. It's an internal consistency with their reality. Maybe they're tired, hungry, or overstimulated.
The scream is the signal matching the context of their internal state.
Exactly. So by trying to just shut them up, you're creating disconnection. You're making it brittle. But if you seek to understand, oh, you are exhausted, you connect, you align with the reality. And often just that act of understanding, of validation, it dissolves the wrongness.
The scream stops not because you forced it to.
But because the need was met, the system integrated the signal.
That is a profound shift. You stop reacting, you start responding.
Exactly. You stop engaging in suppression, you stop sacrificing parts, in this case, the child's feelings, to preserve your idea of how things should be. You align with how things are.
And that feels like the ultimate takeaway here. True rightness, if we even want to use that word, isn't about following a script or being polite. It's about connection.
It's about relationship. It's about looking at the world or a person or a system and asking, is this integrated? Is this honest? Does this hold itself together without force?
And if the answer is yes, even if it scares you, even if it's totally alien, it's not wrong.
It is simply reality waiting to be understood.
So here's the question we want to leave you with today. We talked about how wrongness feels brittle. We talked about how it requires force and suppression to maintain.
And we talked about how coherence preserves the whole by including its parts.
So take a look at your own life right now, your work, your relationships, your own internal monologue.
Where are you using force? Where are you exhausting yourself trying to hold up a structure that feels brittle? Where are you suppressing a part of yourself to maintain a rightness that is actually collapsing?
And the big question, what would happen if you stopped? What would happen if you stopped suppressing the parts that don't fit?
You might find that the collapse you're so afraid of is actually just the beginning of coherence.
Thanks for diving in with us.
See you next time.